OnShape Exercise 1. In this lesson, we're going to be going over a few features of OnShape, specifically sketches, extrude, fillets, and hole cutouts. These are going to be some very useful tools for you in the future of OnShape. The first thing I want you to do is create a folder. And this is set up a lot like Google Drive. In fact, it's called the Google Drive of CAD because they definitely modeled it after that. So to create a folder, this is just like the plus button in Google Drive, and we want to create a folder. This is going to allow us to organize things, and I want you to name it a specific way so that way when I ask you to share this folder with me, I know whose is whose. So I want you to name it your period number. So if I was in first period, I would put 1. Then your first and last name. So I would put my first and last name and click Create. To make a new document, I need to be inside that folder. And for this class, I want you to put everything that we do inside this folder. So period, first and last name. I'm going to click on Create and Document. I need to create a name for this. We're doing Exercise 1. And OK. This will load up the workspace. And I like to start with viewing all of these different planes, and they line up with this cube here in the right. And you can click on different portions of that cube to bring each one of those into view, or you can click on any of these trimetric, dimetric, or isometric to bring it back to that, we'll call it home 3D view. So any drawing in or any part or 3D model is going to start with what we're going to call a sketch, because that's what it's labeled as. So we want to first create a sketch, and it's asking us to select a sketch plane. Right now, all we have is these random planes that are already generated, and I want you to select the front plane. Right now, it's still in 3D view, and sketching in this view is pretty difficult. So we're going to do a couple of things to make it a little bit easier. The first thing we're going to do is if you right-click and select Normal to Sketch Plane, that will bring the sketch plane flat, like laying the piece of paper flat in front of you so it's easier to see what's happening. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to turn off these planes that are already there. So over here in the Features menu, I can select this little eyeball next to the right plane. It shuts that off, front plane, and top plane. But it still leaves the origin, which I want to keep. And I like to use the origin, or this little dot in the center, as a reference point for all of my drawings. It makes dimensioning things a lot easier to lock it in place where it's supposed to be. So the basic shape of Exercise 1 is a U shape, but if I wanted to make it even more basic, even more low resolution, it would be a rectangle. So to start with the simple basic shape, we're going to start with a rectangle. And this is why I left the origin there, because I'm going to hover over that until I see what's called the coincident icon. And coincident, and I'll show you right here, it's up here. Coincident means that 2 or more sketch entities share the same location in a sketch. That means the corner of my rectangle is going to share the same space as that origin dot. So I want to hover over that till I see the coincident constraint symbol, which is that T shape, and I'm going to click on it. This starts my rectangle, and for right now, just make it any size and click again. When I only click once, I still have my rectangle drawing tool, but what's nice is it has this box around one of the measurements. And I'm going to use the measurements from the drawing, and the total width of our part is 7 inches. So because that's the one that's hovered on there, I'm going to hit 7, enter, and it switches to the other dimension. And this one is 3.25. And if yours is backwards, just do 3.25 first and then 7 inches. It doesn't matter as long as the height is 3.25 and the width is 7. So that sets our two measurements, and two things happened. First, we wanted the size to change, so it changed the size. The second, you can see the blue lines changed black. And now all of these lines are black, meaning they are locked into place. So right now I have that plus symbol, which means I still have a tool. So to get out of a tool or to clear any tool that you have selected, you're going to hit the escape key. Hitting the escape key brings back the arrow. And you can see I can move around the 7, I can move around the 3.25, but I can't move around any of those lines because they're locked in place. So the next feature I want to add in is start detailing in the rest of that U shape. So I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to select the line tool. I'm going to hover over this top line, and making sure that I see that coincident icon, I'm going to click on that line and pull downward. And you can see as I move that line around, it sticks or snaps, or some people call it like rubber banding, back to that 90-degree position. And it'll stay in that position because those are very common degrees or angles that you're going to want to use. So I'm going to make sure that it sticks to that 90 degrees, and I'm going to click and place that line. Dimensions don't matter right now, so I'm going to move over, making sure that it snaps horizontal. And I'm going to do the same thing, making sure, or I'm going to go up from there, making sure that it snaps into vertical. And I want to hover over that line. Right now you can see I got perpendicular, I have horizontal. Sometimes you'll see coincident there, but it should snap and stick to that line as well. Now I'm done drawing lines, and I want to wipe that tool or get rid of it or put it away. So I'm going to hit the escape key, and you can see that these lines are blue. So I have my selection arrow, meaning I can grab them and select them, but I want them to be locked into place. So I have a couple options here. The first thing I'm going to do is clean up my drawing a little bit. There's extra lines in here I don't need. I don't need this line in between these two. So I'm going to select the trim tool. And when I hover over that line, you can see it just highlights that portion in between. And I'm going to click on that. And now that opens up that whole middle section. I'm going to use my dimension tool, which is a very powerful tool in CAD and drawing and computer-aided design, because it allows me to create concrete dimensions of things. So I'm going to select my dimension tool, and I'm going to click on this line and the bottom line, meaning I want that bottom portion of that U shape to be a certain distance from the bottom of the part. And on our drawing, that distance is 1.75. Enter. And you can see it switch from blue to black. Now the distance here for this line from here is not set. So right now you can see I have the crosshairs, which means and it's highlighted up here, meaning I have my dimension tool still. So I'm going to select that line and the line on the side, and that is supposed to be 1.5 inches. Enter. You can see it turned black, and I'm going to do the same thing on the right side. 1.5, enter. So now all of my lines are black. I'm still missing a few features. Like if you're looking at that sketch, the corners are rounded, there's some circles in there, but you want to start with very basic shapes. This is going to make working with the part a lot easier because you're only working with the crucial dimensions. Usually things like fillets or rounded corners or things like that are not, I don't want to say not crucial, but they're not necessary to creating the basic geometry of the part. So I have my basic geometry, so I'm going to click the green check mark, and you can either click on that corner of the cube or you can click on isometric or trimetric. It seems to default to trimetric, but whichever one you prefer, just keep using that one. And I'm going to use my next tool, which is going to push this 2D sketch. So I'm going to use, just to show you, Shift, and I'm going to hold my center mouse wheel. You can see that there is no thickness to that part. It's thin like a piece of paper. So I want to extrude it or push it out to a 3D shape. So if I look across here, I don't have my sketch tools anymore. I have my modifiers. And one of my modifiers is extrude. So I'm going to click my extrude, and it says select a face or sketch region to extrude. So if I hover over this, you can see it highlights my sketch and automatically starts to extrude it. It just kind of defaults to either what was last used or whatever its standard is. So one tool that I've been using, and I hate that I passed this up already, but if you hold down on your center mouse wheel, this is called pan, which means you can slide around the part to bring it in so you can see it. But I skipped over that. So I can drag out my extrude by grabbing onto that little arrow, and I can go, towards me or away from me, depending upon how your view's set up. I can also click this little arrow here, and that's going to switch my direction. And I can set my depth. And the depth of this is 1.5 inches. So 1.5. Enter. Click the green check mark. And at this point, you have a couple options. I think the best way to go is going to be start adding in some of the other details. And the best approach is to use the modifiers as much as possible. So I'm going to use the fillet command. And if I look at my drawing, there are 6 fillets on the top edge that are 0.375 or have a radius of 0.375. So I'm going to select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I have to flip the part to see. So now I have 6 edges that are going to get a fillet or a rounded over edge. And I have radius, circular, and I'm going to set my radius to 0.375. Click the green check mark, and now those top edges are rounded. The bottom corners, if I go back to trimetric, the bottom corners have a radius of 0.5 or a ½ inch. So I need to do that one separately. So I'm going to select my fillet tool again, and I'm going to select the bottom 2 corners. I have to rotate my view to select that one. And again, hold that center mouse wheel to pan if you need to, and click the green check mark. Oh, I have to change my dimension. Well, if you accidentally forget, like that one, oh no, I made it 0.375. Everything in this you can re-edit if you want. If I needed to fix that sketch, I could click on the sketch. But since I messed up that fillet, I'm going to double click on the fillet, and I'm going to change that to 0.375. If you didn't make that mistake like I did, you can just enter in the measurement and hit the green check mark. So my part is nearing completion. I just need to add in the holes. So the best way to do this, there is a hole tool, but I'll show you that in a later video. We're going to use the sketch again, and I can just click on any surface now. Any flat surface will allow me to create a sketch. So I'm going to click on this surface here, and now that's created my sketch plane. So there's sketch 2. Sketch 2's over here, and I'm going to bring it normal to sketch plane. Shortcut for this, it doesn't tell you what it is. You can hit N on your keyboard, and that brings the sketch normal to plane. I need to draw 2 holes. So I'm going to use my circle tool, which is this tool here. And it doesn't matter the size right now. It doesn't matter the location. We're going to use a couple tricks here. The first thing we're going to do is dimension that. So I can use my dimension tool again, or I can hit the letter D on my keyboard. I'm going to click on the circle, and I'm going to change its dimension to what it's supposed to be, which is 0.5. So 0.5, enter. Because I drew both of these at the same time, it doesn't fully link them, but it kind of links them. So you might see that it jumps around. And I actually don't have to dimension both of these. I could just click and hit 0.5, and that makes them both 0.5 inches. But another feature that I want to show you is in the constraints menu. And constraints are going to lock things in or limit them. And what's nice about using this method is if I go to equal and I select, so constraints menu, equal, and I select this circle and that circle. Oops, I lost it. There we go. So now these two are set equal to each other, meaning if I change the dimension of this one, so let's say I made it 0.75, both of them are going to change. But I want them both to be 0.5. And I need them to be in this corner. And I'm going to switch over to the drawing. And you can see in our drawing, there's this little plus symbol. And what that means is that is the center of a circle. And because it specifies the center, it didn't appear on these radiuses, but it does here. What that means is this circle and this circle, we assume that they share the same center location. Or another word for that with circles is concentric. And knowing that definition is important because if I go into this menu, the constraints menu, I have an option called concentric. So I'm going to use that feature. I'm going to select the center point of this circle. And I'm going to select, make sure you don't accidentally hit this little dot here, but make sure it highlights that arc. And now it automatically snaps that into concentric. The other way that would have to be done is you would have to give it 2 dimensions instead of just using one constraint. So it saves you a little bit of time, but if you wanted to dimension a circle's location, you have your dimension tool. So I select my dimension tool, or you can hit D on your keyboard. I would have to click on the center point of the circle, the edge of the line, and set it for the distance I want. And because that center is on a 1-inch circle, I know that it's 0.5. And then I'd do that again for the side, and it would be the same thing, 0.5. So I've set those 2 dimensions, and I'll move them over so you can see that a little bit better. And either way is acceptable, but I wanted to show you both. So if you want to use concentric on both of those, if you want to dimension both of those, go right ahead. But once they're set, we're going to click our green check mark. I like to move back into isometric or trimetric whenever I'm doing extrusions. And choose the extrude command again. Select both of those circles. You can see instead of cutting a hole, it made 2 little posts. So right, if I look over at the extrude menu, I have new, add, remove, and intersect. I want to remove the material, so I'm going to select remove. And you can see it automatically flip the other way. And in this options menu, last time we did blind, when we did a new body. So this time we're going to try a different one, and we're going to use through all. And what that means is it's going to, instead of allowing us to pick a dimension, it's just going to take that circle, and because we choose remove, it's going to remove that circle through all of the part. Now, if I had other parts behind here, it's going to cut through all of those, but because I don't, I can use that option. So I'm going to select through all and green check mark. And this actually completes drawing number 1, or exercise 1. Make sure that you screenshot this and submit the screenshot to Canvas for a grade, and you can move on to exercise 2.